Welcome to Dune Chapter by Chapter. I'm Dominic. So in the last video, the chapter that I talked about was the one where Gurney Halleck joins the smugglers. And, all he had left was revenge, that he wanted to get against the Beast Raban. As far as he knew, Lady Jessica and Paul are dead, and House Atreides has been completely destroyed. House Atreides is a thing of the past. It's gone. And that's all he's got left. All he had left was revenge against the Harkonnens, and he really wanted to get revenge against the Beast Raban in particular. So now in this chapter, we switch back now to Paul and his mother still out in the desert. They're looking for the Fremen. They want to find the Fremen. That's their only hope left for survival, because there's no going back. The Harkonnens aren't, the Baron's not convinced that they're dead. He's still, because no bodies have been seen, so he's not totally convinced. And even though a lot of people are assuming that Paul and his mother are dead, they're not. They're still out there. They're still surviving. So they're still on this dangerous journey going through the desert in search of the Fremen. So what's interesting about this is we see how Paul can use his prescience and how he just seems to know things because of his prescience. So they have to cross this large area of sandy desert because the rocks they're at, there's another set of rocks, outcropping of rocks on the other side. Almost kind of like large rocks kind of rising up out of the horizon of the sand. And so Paul shows his mother, he has almost like this memory of how to walk as a Fremen. So he shows him, we have to sound like natural part of the environment. We can't have any kind of rhythm to our walking, because the rhythms, that's what attracts a sandworm. The sandworm will come right for the rhythmic vibrations of anything and attack it immediately. And so he has his prescience, and he can just do it. Because he can see into the future, so he can almost like access skills that he hasn't learned yet in a way to perform these types of feats. So Jessica watches him do it. They're doing it, but it's a very weird way to walk, trying to walk with no rhythm. And they're kind of slow going. So he has a thumper, and he sets that for a 30-minute timer. So they're going to go travel for 30 minutes across the sand, and then this thumper is going to kick in, and then it's going to call a worm or distract the worm, so the worm goes after the thumper and leaves them alone. So, but one thing about this is that's kind of interesting, and it's something that almost kind of slips by because it's briefly mentioned in this chapter, is Jessica looks at the white sands that's kind of stretched across the desert, and the scene, I kind of like the night scenes in this book, and I hope they kind of reproduce one of them for the film that's going to be coming out. And it's just like this long, I just kept picture this wide open sandy white desert with moonlight, from the twin moons kind of bouncing off it, and it's sparkling a bit, and then they have like a sky filled with stars because it describes stars and stuff like that. So I always imagine that pretty vividly in my mind when I read these chapters, and it just has this like romantic feel to it, I guess. It kind of sounds corny, but that's how I envision it. So Jessica's looking across this big, vast, open white desert, and she kind of realizes something. That the way the sand is, the way everything is kind of like carved out in this area, that it had to be full of water at one point in time. And then the chapter just kind of goes on with them crossing the sand and stuff like that. So I was reading it, and there's like little hints like that throughout Dune. And the realization is, when you kind of piece them together, is that the worms on Arrakis, these gigantic sandworms, they're not indigenous to Arrakis. They didn't naturally evolve. Arrakis wasn't always a desert planet. It was once like a very green, watery planet, like Earth or Caladan or any other planet like that. But something brought the worms to Arrakis at some point in the past. And it was the Arrakeen worms that actually caused the planet to become a desert. And that's something that's just subtly hinted at throughout the books. And here's one hint of it, one of the first hints of it here in this chapter. I don't know if it's one of the first ones, but it's a hint at that. And it's kind of interesting. And it's one of those things that in fiction, I hope to God, Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson never write a book trying to explain it, is the origin of the sandworms. I just like the whole thing kept in a shroud of mystery. So you're always going to wonder, because nothing they're going to do is going to match up to the questions in your mind. It'll never be answered in a satisfactory way. Just like the space jockey in the first Alien film. Like that whole thing, the whole ship crashed. Why are the eggs there? What happened to this guy? Why is he like growing into the chair? Like what busted out of its chest? You know, where were they going when they crashed? All these questions are, the questions are better than the answers. And then they go and try to explain it, and they create a Prometheus, and it just ruins the mystery. Some things are just better left unsolved when it comes to fiction. And this is one of the things I hope they never explain this. They never explain where the worms came from. What is the origin of the spice? And how, like, who put the worms there? You know, you can always wonder, was it some strange alien race? Or was it some other group of humans that nobody knows about that did this, or why? Or it's just left a complete mystery. And that's how it should stay. And so now they cross the desert and they make it to the other side. But not without attracting the attention of a worm. So they have another worm. It's not quite as big as the last one that chased after them, but still they can hear it like this loud rushing sound. It's making this, you know, almost sounds like a storm coming at them. So now it's no point to walk. Like now they just got to haul ass and run as fast as they can to get to the other side there, to get to the rocks. They're almost there, but the worm is just coming in. There's like a rock face, and there's a crevice in there, and that's what they're going for. If they can get inside there, they can get away from the worm. So they run as fast as they can. They get inside this, and then they hear like another loud booming noise far off in the distance, and you can hear like this the booming noise or the thumping noise of another thumper somewhere off. Someone else has planted a thumper. Someone else called worm. And then Paul has almost like a prescient flash at this moment when he hears the thumper. And then he says, well, someone's distracting it for us, or they're calling it. And his mother asks, why would anyone want to call one of these things? Why would you want to call the worm, like, on purpose? And then, like, Paul has a prescient moment, but it's almost there. Like, he can almost grasp the answer to this question. Why would someone on purpose call a gigantic sandworm like that? And it kind of gives a little bit of description of the sandworm's mouth. Like, the mouth is 80 meters in diameter, so it's a big thing. And but he can't quite get there. He can't quite grasp the answer. So anyway, they make their way up the crevice, up this crack, and they find like hand-carved steps or man-made steps in this like rock face. So they make their way up. There's no light. There's no nothing. And then they go into this area where it's almost like this. It's described as like a fairyland, like this idyllic spot hidden away within these rocks of like a greenery and like these little mice animals hopping around that they can see. And it's, you know, it's like this little paradise in this unforgivable, harsh environment. And what I like about it, like in this chapter, Frank Herbert gives you a moment, like gives the characters a moment to just kind of ease up. Oh, we found what a nice, beautiful place. Like, you know, we can just rest here. We can pitch our tent. We can rest here. There's a weird little mice hopping around, you know, and then immediately they're reminded that their Arrakis gives no quarter. As a predatory bird swoops down and kills one of these mice, swoops down, grabs it. Again, they're reminded of the harsh realities of this planet that is just totally unforgiving, and it's just this brutal environment that you have to be with your. There is no moment. There is no moment where you can rest. You got to have your wits about you at all times. And then Paul mentions that, well, now we got to pitch the tent. hopefully we'll find the Fremen. And then his voice, he's kind of cut off by another voice saying, a lot of people, no one wants to find the Fremen. You know, it's not a good thing to find the Fremen. And then they realize they're surrounded by the Fremen. The Fremen were there hiding. And then they can hear the Fremen, you know, deciding, well, what are we going to do with these two? And then Jessica has the horrifying realization they're going to kill us and take us for our body's water. So, I mean, the Fremen, they're not good. They're not good people to come across in the desert if you're not a Fremen. If you're just, they don't care who you are. You could be a good guy, bad guy. They don't care. They have a very strict, harsh way of life because the Fremen culture is shaped by the environment that they live in. And Arrakis, they have to be brutal. Everything has to be strong and brutal. And so if you're of absolutely no use to the Fremen tribe and they come across you, you know, you don't know how the desert works, you'll just drag them down. The only thing you're good for is the water in your body. So anyway, Paul has a moment of panic. He's almost gonna run, but then his mother's training kicks in, and he gets into that relaxed mode, ready for battle. Same thing with Jessica, even though she's exhausted. You know, they've been traveling, crossing the desert. She gets all ready, all spring-loaded, ready to go, ready to do combat with the Fremen. And then it's like a cliffhanger. That chapter ends with this cliffhanger ending. But the other thing that's interesting is Paul starts to panic because in the book so far, as his prescience and his ability to see into the future grows, it almost becomes like a drug to him. He becomes more and more dependent upon it. And so this actually acts as a weakness towards it, because in this moment, this is like one of the dread that he describes as like a dark spot in his prescience. This is a moment he doesn't know what's going to happen. He can't see into the future here. He has no idea. This is like a complete question mark to him. And so, it freaks him out a little bit because he's starting to get too accustomed to the idea of seeing into the future. And then it ends with this cliffhanger. They're both squared off against the Fremen, Paul and his mother. They found the Fremen, but the Fremen, they're not ready to take them in. They just see them as two people lost in the desert, and they can just take them and kill them and get their bodies water. So that's it. Like, it's just brutal all the way on Arrakis. So pretty cool stuff. So that's everything I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I will see you at the next one.